right? Racism is as American as cherry pie. And these things that we've seen take place recently that have been captured on smartphones and some of these reports that we've had, uh, these things have always gone on, right? Maybe there's better technology uh, to record these things, and there's social media platforms that can share it to more people, even when corporate media maybe doesn't. These things have been going on when I was a youth in the 80s and beforehand. This was going on. My father was a young man during the 67 uprising here in Detroit, and it was going on before in the time of my grandfather and before. So this is a very American phenomenon. These are not anomalies. And that an African American is uh, 4 times more likely to be shot and killed by the police, not even including as well people who are choked to death or beaten to death uh, while unarmed. There's a serious problem when African American men and women are 4 times more likely to be killed by the police department than their white counterparts, and the percentage even goes up higher when we're talking about the number of people who are unarmed in comparison to the white population. Because and most times when a white person gets killed by the police, the white person is armed, and whereas it is statistically much more likely that when a African American gets killed by law enforcement, they actually are unarmed. So this is something that is a historical fact, and this is a fact that can be proven by not CAIR's data or the National Action Network or NAACP or ACLU. These are actually things that the government themselves have kept statistics on. So this is something that is real. Now, when we're talking about this issue of police brutality and what's going on in the United States of America, and I want to say this with all due respect to organizers and activists in the community, and I believe that protesting has its place. I believe that calling and lobbying for stronger legislation has its place. But what I would say is that we have to imagine a different way of dealing with this problem, because the way that we've dealt with the problem, the issue of police brutality and Black people being killed by the police is the same as it was 50 years ago in 1970. It has not fundamentally changed since 1970. You can ask any African Americans of age of that time and they'll tell you. And actually the issue of mass incarceration of African Americans is worse now than it was 50 years ago, right? And if simply marching and laws in court cases would have solved the problem that takes place in America, then the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Dr. King marching and other sorts of legislation such as the Fair Housing Act and affirmative action and the laws that are on the books regarding police brutality, the laws are on the books as it relates to anti-lynching laws. If laws in and of themselves would have solved the problem, then the problem would have been solved when I was born. I was born in 1971. So the problem should have been solved by now if it was just by laws. But what's fundamentally the issue in the United States of America is that there's a deep-seated culture of racism in America. And this culture is informed by spiritual maladies, right? By spiritual diseases and spiritual sicknesses. So if we're going to have any talk about really dealing with this issue in a holistic way, then we have to have some sort of discussion or some sort of analysis, in my opinion, about how we're going to shift culture. And this just isn't done through politics, right? And at the root of shifting the culture, we have to deal with correcting the thinking and the thoughts of the people. And unsound hearts or spiritually sick hearts cannot produce proper thinking. So there has to be some sort of ilaj or spiritual remedies to deal with the racism to help change the culture. And we as Muslims, we believe in metaphysical realities, not just physical realities. We believe in metaphysical realities. We believe in the ghaib. We believe in the unseen. And Allah Azza wa Jal is the creator of the unseen realm of the ghaib of the malakut, in which they are unseen. And we as Muslims who are believers, we believe that the unseen is the first governance over the seen. We're people of faith. We believe that the unseen is the first governance of the seen. So we just can't think that materialistic ways of organizing or materialistic analysis is going to simply do the job. No, brothers and sisters in Islam, that racism is a form of compounded ignorance, or jahl murakkab. It's a form of compounded ignorance when it is systematic in a society such as the United States of America. It is compounded ignorance. And in fact, we can even go a step further and say that racism is satanic religion. Racism is satanic religion. And why do I say that? Because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded the malaika, the angels and those who were in their company, and of course we know that the leader of the jinn was in their company, Iblis. And Allah commanded them in the Quran, as we are told, to prostrate to Adam alayhi salam, and all of them prostrated except Iblis. And then we know what Iblis said. قَالَ أَنَا خَيْرٌ مِّنْهُ خَلَقْتَنِي مِن نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِن طِينٍ. He said, Iblis said, I am better than him, meaning Adam. And then he told Allah, even in his ignorance, confessing that he didn't even create himself. He said, you made me a fire, but you made him of the dirt. So this is the first act of racism in creation. The Iblis and the jinn race, made of fire free of smoke, thought that he was better than the human race who was made from the dirt. This is the original act of racism. Sayyiduna Ali ibn Abi Talib, al-Khalifatul Rashid, the fourth Khalifa, Ali, he said of this act, and this is related to a tafsir of this ayah of the Quran, he spoke about Iblis, the enemy of God. He said of him that he is Imamul Muta'assabin wa Salaful Mustakbarin, that Iblis is the Imam, he is the leader of the tribalists, or we could say the racists, and he is a Salaf, he is a predecessor of those who displayed their arrogance. So at the root of racism is the most deadly spiritual disease. And as kibr, arrogance, that then expresses itself into kabr. This is the most dangerous of spiritual diseases, and it led to Iblis disobeying the command of Allah Azza wa Jal. So we have to have this sort of analysis. How are we going to deal with this issue of people viewing themselves as being superior to others? How do we also deal with the issue of hasad or envy? When people secretly look at a group of people and think that they have something in them that they want that the other group should be denied, a type of envy, a type of jealousy that would then cause a group of people irrationally to try to put a group of people down. This is also relating to it. And then also the issue of greed that also plays a part in it, where a person or a group of people, they think that they deserve all these things and they think they should have it to themselves and other people shouldn't have it because they're inferior. So they prop themselves up as bigger. So we have to look at these things from a spiritual analysis from their roots. brothers and sisters. And then racism is just a manifestation when it comes to societally from the culture that's based on these kabair, on these grave and deadly sins, or these what we call major sins. The kabair are called the major sins. So we need an analysis of how we're going to shift culture in America. And yes, we should march when need be. And yes, we should pick up the phone and call elected officials, no doubt about it. And we should have stronger laws. But we have to be more deliberate in the long-term game of dealing with these issues. And this goes for Islamophobia too. We can't sue our way out of Islamophobia, right? Or anti-Muslim bigotry. We can't. We can't protest our way outside of Islamophobia, because we're talking about sick hearts. And sick hearts who have bias wear judge robes. Some of them wear Klan robes too. They wear the Klan robe in secret, and then they wear the black robe on the bench. And people who have diseased hearts who are sitting on jury boxes, and diseased hearts in mayor offices, and police chiefs, or on police forces, or in jury boxes, or who are senators, or who are 45 in the Oval Office. Or the drone, the Air Force general who sets out who gets drone bombed and who doesn't. We can't march our way out of that. There has to be spiritual solutions and remedies to help fix bad thinking. And Islam has the remedies. The Quran and the lived example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has the remedies for these brothers and sisters in Islam. Which leads me to the next part, and then we will go to the Q&A. And we're talking about organizing. We're talking about organizing. We want to know how we can help. And a lot of advocates have given ways that we can help, and organizations have given ways in which we can help certain organizations and center Black voices, and what legislation that needs to be passed, and what elected officials need to be called. And that's good, and I'm supportive of those. And I've organized around those for years. But I want to pose something else to you, because we're talking about long-term. We're talking about long-term. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the Quran, and this is addressing the people of the book, but there is something that we can take from this as Muslims, because the Prophet alayhi salam told us that we would follow people inch by inch, span by span, even into the hole of a lizard. And when he was asked, was this the people of the book? He said, yes. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, أَتَأْمُرُونَ النَّاسَ بِالْبِرِّ وَتَنْسَوْنَ أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ تَتْلُونَ الْكِتَابَ أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ. Do you enjoin piety and good conduct for other people, but you forget it for yourselves? Yet you recite the book, you recite the scripture. Do you not have any intelligence? So Islam is racism free. Islam has a solution for all problems in this world that can lead human beings to success in this life and the next life. So Islam is like a pure, we can say like pure, clean water with no additives, no toxics, no toxins in it. That's what Islam is, it's pure. Deen Islam. Now we Muslims are the carriers of Islam. We carry Islam in out to the public. So if we pour this clean water to try to take it to the public, but we're taking it to them with cups that are dirty, Do we expect the people to drink that water? Or if they drink that water and we give it to them with a dirty cup, maybe they might have an allergic reaction to it. So part of the thing that we have to do is in our organizing, brothers and sisters in Islam, is that we have to continue as a Muslim community to try to, on the level inside of ourselves, to reevaluate our relationships. How do we socialize with each other? Not just in the masjid. How do we socialize with each other outside of the masjid? Do we socialize with each other at all beyond different racial groups? What is the composition of our masajid and our Islamic organizations as far as leadership? How do we take varying demographics opinions about what the community agenda should be? These are things that we have to look at and we have to investigate and be honest about. And if we have family members that express types of bigotry or racism against other groups of people, then as the saying says, charity starts at home. And we have to work with inside our own families and our own social structures to deal with that sort of issue. And Islam is religion free. I mean, Islam is racism free, but Muslims aren't post-racial. So we shouldn't act like that's the case, right? And I have so many stories I can tell about experiences overt. Many of them implicit bias or covert things, but very overt things that I've experienced and seen in our community. So we have to be careful about that. Two other things now stop. And there's a question about protests. I will get to that. Let me say this also to people here and maybe to the younger people that are watching, because I've seen something in the community I've been seeing amongst younger activists and people and organizers I find quite disturbing. So a lot of people in our community have gotten so-called woke in recent years. And there's been a lot of discourse and discussion about the issue of white supremacy, or I say the false ideology of white supremacy, because white supremacy, whites aren't supreme, right? But the false ideology of white supremacy, where there are people who think they're superior because they're white, and then they think that they should have a particular place over non-whites in society. And when we're talking about racism in America, systemically, really we're talking about the false ideology of white supremacy is what we're really talking about. But what I've heard and seen over the last couple of years that some Muslims, they aren't just anti-white supremacy, they've actually become anti-white. And we have to check ourselves about that, right? We can't look at white people as being irredeemable, right? The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam he never canceled a whole group of people. He wasn't the cancel culture. We as Muslims need to have a message of redemption to the broader society. And then also, we can't have a situation where we have white people in our community who become Muslim or come to the masjid feel uncomfortable in their own community, right? So we have to be careful about that. And this is one of the problems of the Nation of Islam. They had in the old times, they had a type of diagnosis of the problem in America, and they had what they believed to be some medicine or a cure, but just like physical medicine, if you take too much of a particular medicine, you overdose or it can become toxic. And in this particular position, we can get so caught up in identity politics and talking about the man or the white man, it can cause us to have a toxic reaction of actually being anti-white, and being anti-white is un-Islamic. We can be anti-white supremacists or anti-white supremacy. We can't be anti-white. And the Prophet ﷺ clearly addressed this in the farewell sermon. He said the Arab does not have superiority of the non-Arab, nor does the non-Arab have virtue over the Arab. And the black doesn't have virtue over the Ahmar. And this means white. The Aswad doesn't have virtue over the white, nor does the white have a superiority over the black. Illa bitaqwa, except with piety and God consciousness, right? So we have to be careful about that, right? And we need to have a redemptive message for America. Now, the next point that I just want to, and this also relates to our white brothers who are Russian and Balkans. By the way, I used to be the imam at the Bosnian American Islamic Center in Hamtramck, Michigan. I was the only non-Balkan in that entire Jama'ah, but they hired me to be their imam. So we have to be careful about that. Now, in regards to Masajid organizing protests this weekend, I would say two things regarding that. If you want to have a protest in solidarity with what's going on. The first thing is do a honest assessment of can you do the protests with proper protective gear and proper social distancing if you're going to organize it or be a part of it, right? I don't know about Ohio or Cincinnati. I know in Detroit, COVID-19, we're still getting cases, and actually there's more cases starting to come in, and because people have become relaxed. And we've heard in a few other cities where more people in the last couple of days, this is 7 day of protests, but more people are coming in complaining of COVID symptoms, COVID-19 symptoms, and these are people who actually were at protests. So there's no social distancing going on at most of these protests. So keep that in mind. Then secondly, is that if you're going to have a protest, then if the masjid is organized, alhamdulillah, make sure that you have some people that have some sort of security or crowd control for the protests. Because what we saw in Detroit is this, and I will conclude with this. Some grassroots organizers, non-Muslims, but African Americans, organized the first protest. Then as that was weighing down, some other people who weren't from the community came and took over the protests. And then for the next days that have been going on, these weren't even protests organized by African Americans or people in the grassroots. These were people who came outside of the community. And there's people who came in that have different agendas. There's some people who are sincere in solidarity, who will follow proper grassroots leadership. There are some people who are sincere and foolish. They're sufaha. There are also some people who we believe have outside agendas who really don't care about dealing with the issue of violence against Black lives, but they have almost type of anarchist or anti-establishment, anti-law enforcement agenda. People coming to the city, dropping off pallets of bricks, trying to encourage people to throw bricks at the police. And these are what happen to be white Americans. We have videos in different cities of people spray painting BLM, Black Lives Matter. They weren't even black, spray painting on the Starbucks, spray painting on the church, spray painting on the synagogue, destroying property. Those weren't black folks. Actually, Black Lives Matter had nothing to do with that, right? But it gives the wrong intention. So you want to make sure that you can control the messaging within inside of your protest, and that your protest doesn't get taken over by outside agitators, anarchists, white supremacists, or agent provocateurs. Because we know when Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Held his protest march for the sanitation workers in Memphis back in 1968. We know this through the counterintelligence program declassified documents that actual paid informants, provocateurs, infiltrate the mosque to stir up trouble and do property damage, break windows, so to delegitimize the march, and that to give the police a reason to be heavy-handed on legitimate peaceful protesters. So we have to keep our eyes open. This is real stuff going on right here. I'm not just being conspiratorial. I'm telling you what I've seen going on right now. Eyewitness reports I've gotten from people in Detroit, Atlanta, Chicago, and Minneapolis. And then this is part of American history as well, when I mentioned what happened with Dr. King. So we have to be, yes, I'm all for protesting. We're actually thinking about organizing a driving protest, right? Where a bunch of cars get together, leave from one area and drive through certain strategic neighborhoods in the area where certain signage as a sign of support and as a sign of saying that we are against systemic racism and brutality against Black people here in America, right? So we're thinking about that type of idea. I believe they're doing one or they did one in Atlanta recently as well. So these are some ideas for you. I'm ready for questions and answers. Sorry, I went over. I only planned on talking for 30 minutes. I went over a little bit, so please pardon me, and I'm ready to take any questions that you have.
Call on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to change the diseased heart of the oppressors.
MashaAllah, very good question. So one simple dua that we have, and this is prophetic, that we know that when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he was faced by the people at Uhud and at Ghazwa Uhud, actually, which took place in the month of Shawwal, actually, and we are in the month of Shawwal, that we know that a number of prominent Sahaba were martyred. They were killed, including Sayyidina Hamza, and he was killed in a very, his body was mutilated. So afterwards, the Sahaba they asked the Prophet ﷺ if he was going to pray against those people or curse those people for what they did. And he did not. His prayer was, Allahumma hdi qawmi fa innahum la ya'lamun. He asked for their hidayah. So he didn't curse them. He didn't pray for their destruction. He didn't pray for la'na upon them. La'na means removal. He prayed for their hidayah and for their guidance, right? And alhamdulillah, some of those same people who fought against the Prophet ﷺ, who lived, like Khalid ibn al-Walid, those people later were granted hidayah and they became Muslim. So we should pray for the guidance of the people of the United States of America. Pray for their guidance. We should not pray against the wrongdoers, but we should also pray for those who have been wronged, right? And there is not one specific prayer that you have to say in the Arabic language, and that's even for that one I just said right there, even though it comes from a hadith. But pray sincerely from your heart, that you pray to Allah to guide you, to pray to Allah to guide the people, and pray and call upon Nasir al-Mustad'afin, call upon the one who helps the oppressed, and you ask Almighty Allah to assist the people who are suffering zulm, suffering oppression, that He lifts it from them. And there also are times in which dua is recommended or better, right? So one of those times is, for instance, Laylatul Jum'ah, for instance, right? Is one of those nights, is like after Maghrib time tonight is one of those times, and we should take more time to make dua on Laylatul Jum'ah, for instance. We make dua during the time of between the adhan and the iqamah. Is a special time for making for dua as well. Making dua after we've done one of the fara'id, one of our 5 daily prayers. We should take time, not be in a rush, and make dua. Should also, like, after or at the end of fasting Ramadan, to make dua. The fulfilling of fara'id, our dua are accepted. And then, of course, we should try not to be oppressors, because the Prophet ﷺ said, Da'watu mazlumi mustajaba, that the prayer of the oppressed is answered. There's no veil between the prayer of the oppressed with Allah. So one of the bad things that happen to us is that we wrong people, or if we are racist and that person decides, and they have the right, that person decides to pray against us, then there's no bad for us in this dunya if a mazloom prays against us.
The next question is, what would it take to revise the school curriculum to teach true history of the African Americans and Hispanic grade level, to raise the consciences of young Black, white, and Hispanic for a better future of America?
Well, again, going back to what I said before, it's a good question. I think that there has to be education at the grassroots level first, in trying to change hearts and minds of people, to humanize Black people. And white Americans have a big role to play in this. White people who are in allyship with Black people, of going to their people and trying to educate them. But in regards to school curriculum in particular, this is an issue of dealing with the hearts of people, because see, we have people who are elected who are on school boards. And if these people who are elected on school boards have racist mentalities or racist mindsets, then they're not invested in having a different type of social studies curriculum. Then we also have to deal with the issue of advocacy and advocating towards actual book publishers, who are the ones who actually write the textbooks, and in many cases have written Black people out of history. Like, I remember when I was in high school, it was many moons ago, but the only thing that we heard about, we didn't hear anything positive about Black people, even in Africa, but much less here. That basically our history, as it was taught, was you were brought here as slaves. Then Lincoln supposedly fought the Civil War to free the slaves. Rosa Parks sat on the bus. Dr. King marched. Now everything is cool. That's basically how Black history was presented when I was in school back in the 80s, right? So there has to be a shift as far as how textbooks are changed. This takes advocacy. We need people that to be involved, and are Muslims, to begin to try to work for some of these major publishers of textbooks to help in writing more accurate history. People who are involved in training educators, but also it's very important relaying our school board. And I will say this, because I don't want to talk too long, but the late Speaker of the House, Tip O'Neill, made a statement that's so true. He said, all politics is local. And I would say to Muslims that sometimes we get so overly concerned with national politics of who is running for president or who's going to be the senator, which those are important. But in fact, how to affect local change and change more easily is at the very local level, the grassroots level. Like, who's on the zoning board, the plan commission, who's on the school board, right? Those affect more of our day-to-day issues, and especially affects the curriculum and the services that are offered at schools that are teaching the next generation, that could play a positive role in teaching the next generation of being more inclusive and less racist. And Allah knows best.
So the next question is, what do you say to Muslims who believe they are non-black, believing this is not their issue?
Well, the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his way was justice for everyone. In other words, and I've been saying this in the last couple of days, that to our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, justice didn't mean just us, right? Justice didn't mean just us to him and to his close companions, right? So there are 7 traits of character, akhlaq, in which Allah Azza wa Jal mentions a group of people specifically that he loves, in which the verb yuhib is used, that Allah loves. And one group of people that Allah loves, that he says, Inna Allaha yuhibbul muqsitin, right? That Allah loves the people of justice, right? And if we are living according to وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا رَحْمَةً لِلْعَالَمِينَ, or وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا كَافَةً لِلنَّاسِ, if we are living up to the message of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam as trying to bring comfort to all people, which includes not just Muslims but non-Muslims, not just black but white, or not just Arab but non-Arab, for all people. If we understand our role as being as to be the vicegerents in the earth, then we should view every issue as a Muslim issue. There is no such thing as a non-Muslim issue, because we are supposed to be the vicegerents of the earth. And Allah told us in the Quran, "Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas," that you are the best nation brought out for people. But he didn't say just simply because you say you're a Muslim and you have a beard and you wear hijab. He gives the adjectives of why we are the best nation and what is our mandate to live up to be what Allah wants us to be. He said, "Kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnasi ta'munu bil ma'rufi wa tanhauna 'anil munkari wa tu'minuna billah." You're the best nation brought for people. Why? Because you enjoy what is good and what is just. It's for all people. You forbid that which is evil and unjust. And you believe in the oneness of God. This is what Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran. And the Prophet alayhi salam said in the hadith, "Khairun nasi man yanfu nas," and the best of the people is he who benefits the people. This is our mandate. He didn't say, and the best of the people is the one just who benefits the Muslim or the Arab. And nas is the people. So we have a mandate, right? And I truly believe that if we as Muslims get involved in this issue, if we help erode issues significantly, or if we can help bring to the end of systemic anti-black racism in America, in the process we have dealt with the issue of Islamophobia. If we can work on helping rid America of its original sin of the false ideology of white supremacy, which informs anti-black racism, by de facto or by default, we will have dealt with the issue of Islamophobia in America. I believe this with all my heart. And so we have a stake in this, in our fidelity to Allah, in our fidelity to following his command, in our fidelity to follow the sunnah, but we also have a stake in the game of helping ourselves, or at least for those of you who are Muslim who aren't black. I mean, one can change their religion, but you can't change being black in America. You're black, you're black.
Right.
Right. So and there's no getting out of that. A sister can take her hijab off and try to blend in. I can't take this off. I can't take this. This is real. Right. So that's my advice, and Allah knows best.
Just one comment, Brother Dawud.
Yes.
Our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his last sermon, he mentioned that all mankind's from Adam and Eve. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, and non-Arab has no superiority over an Arab. Also, a white has no superiority over a black, nor a black has any superiority over a white,
Yeah,
except by piety and good actions. But it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it our issue. We cannot say it's not my issue.
that's correct. That's correct.
So the next question, this person says, I felt that you're not with destruction happening now. Many things that the only way to make Black Lives Matter's voices and commands heard. It's been never really heard when protests peacefully. What do you say in that?
I say that number one, and Dr. King talked about this, that a riot is the voice of the unheard. So people are going out the streets doing certain things, although a lot of people who are rioting actually aren't black, by the way. They're not like directly affected. So let me get that narrative straight. The majority of people out burning down buildings and breaking windows so far that are taking place in Minnesota and other cities, those aren't black folks, right? So let's get that straight. But for us as Muslims, it's not our way to ever say the ends justify the means. That's not prophetic. And if we want long-term change or transformation, that cannot be compelled. Only societal transformation can take about by changing hearts, right? And it is not the way of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that we can ever say the ends justify the means. That's not prophetic. We have objectives that we try to seek out, and our final objective is Allah. That's our final objective, Allah. And in this life, we are seeking to do things according to the objectives in which Allah finds. Being against racism, Allah obviously is not pleased with racism, right? He's not pleased with murder. So we have an objective. But in Islam, not only should our objective be sacred, our means are also supposed to be sacred as well, right? And this has to do with fiqh. And we have so many books and so many scholars, and even the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and Sahaba, people like Umar ibn al-Khattab, and Ali ibn Abi Talib, gave certain rules about what we can do and what we can't do. In our maqasid, what other people do is what they do. I'm talking about what should regulate our worldview and how we do things as Muslims. We have the maqasid of Sharia. We have objectives to in the sacred law. We have the preservation of life. This is a very high maqsid called hizbun nafs. But an objective also, the sacred law for us Muslims, though it is not as high as hizbun nafs, but hizbun mal, the protection of property, is an objective for us as Muslims in our sacred law. And our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in the farewell sermon, he said, your blood, your property, and your honor are all sacred, right? So we can't be of the people that say that it's justifiable that because our voices aren't heard, that we can go and burn down businesses in the name of being heard. Like, that's not prophetic. We don't have any justification for that in the Quran and Sunnah that we can do something like that, right? Our scholars have not given us that permission, and we go by that. And I believe that if we follow, and this is part of sabr, perseverance is something that's not passive, it's active. And sabr also means, brothers and sisters in Islam, that we stay patient in holding on to the commandment of Allah. We don't try to take an easier, softer way or try to justify a way outside of what's pleasurable to Allah and His Messenger. So then Allah promises us, though, that if we follow His way, then He says, وَإِنْ يَرْسُمُكُمُ اللَّهُ فَلَا غَالِبَ لَكُمْ. If Allah assists you or aids you, then none can defeat you, right? But the final victory, or what we're planning to see, this dunya is not meant to be a utopia. We don't control the final outcomes of things. Inna Allah ala kulli shay'in qadir. Allah is the one that controls the ultimate outcomes of affairs. All we're supposed to do is follow Allah's command and put forth our best effort and try to do the best that we can, and we will be judged accordingly to that. That's what we have. That's our job. The final outcome, and if we don't get the outcome when we want it, then perhaps there is some wisdom behind why Allah and His qadr didn't decree for it to happen at that time. Allah is in control. That's what I say in regards to that issue, but Allah knows best.
The next question, and this is, how can we address anti-racism within our Muslim communities across generation?
Okay.
This is a lecture by itself.
It's a lecture by itself, and I think I'm going to make this the
last question.
The last comment, because I see of our time, but and this is for a whole nother lecture. So on the macro level, and I mentioned this before in a lecture I gave with my colleague at CAIR Houston, but racism is simply the manifestation of spiritual diseases, right? So part of what we have to do is we have to discuss and talk about remedies for the actual diseases. And I've said this over the years, is that I think in general in our masajid and our khutub and our muhadarat and how we teach Islam in America, there needs to be some adjustments in the emphasis, because many of our masajid, we focus on aqidah, which we should, and fiqh, which we should, and then siyasi matters of politics, but the tazkiyah, the role of ihsan, the role of spiritual purification, about how to raise us up to be more ethical beings. How do we look at the diseases of the heart, amrad al-qulub, like arrogance, like these, and I mentioned some of those spiritual diseases before that inform racism, right? How do we even address those to begin with? Because those are the remedies that are behind the racism to begin with on the inward level. Then we also have the outward level in which we have to discuss these things, but we have to deal with the inward and these basic spiritual things, right? So that's one issue. I believe we also need purposeful socialization. The Prophet ﷺ, during the migration to Medina, he had the brotherhood sisterhood compact that he set up, and he paired off people, right, of different backgrounds. So we need something like that, especially for our young people, for the next generation, where we are very intentional in pairing off people so that they can have regular socialization of different socioeconomic and racial backgrounds, which youth are breaking bread together, that they are learning about each other's culture. And part of this can be done organically through playing with each other and doing house visits from time to time. And from one masjid having a qiyamul layl 1 month for the youth, and people are purposeful from the other masajid of bringing their youth to that place. And they rotate and take it around month by month. Like, we have to come up with some ways of being of purposeful socialization. Similarly, the Prophet did this, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with Ahlul Sufa, with the people of the veranda, where he went and visited those people and had other Sahaba go and sit with people like Salman the Persian, like Bilal the Ethiopian, right? He sent his grandson Al-Hassan ibn Ali to keep company with those people, right? So we have to be purposeful in that. And then another issue, and this is a whole other topic, because I believe there's a crisis of of marriage in the community. But it's not to say that someone cannot marry someone of another group and exceptionalize that one person and still have a bad opinion about other people in that group. That's very true. And my dad told me that a long time ago. So a person can be married, or in the secular world, can date a black man and still have anti-black racism. I mean, we look at that so-called liberal Amy Cooper, who voted for Obama and campaigned for him, and she has a residency in Metro Detroit, by the way, and donate to Pete Buttigieg and Hillary Clinton. She calls up a liberal and date a black guy, but when the rubber hits the road, she picks up the phone to call the police on the black guy, right? But it is to say that Muslims who are trying to be sincere for the sake of Allah, that we know that marriage between people is not just between them, it's the coming together of two families. And we know that this happened with the Sahaba. You know, that the non-Arab Sahaba, basically every single one of them married an Arab of the non-Arab Sahaba, right? So not that everyone should marry someone outside of another ethnicity. No, I believe that the more commonalities are better. But when we find people in our community good character and we've seen them in the community, we shouldn't shy away about trying to introduce our sons and our daughters to people that we see of good character, that come from good families, even if they're from a different ethnicity, if their parents migrate from a different country. If they're born and raised in America, they're probably more American than your Pakistani, Indian, Palestinian, Jordanian identity to begin with, right? Even if they do speak a little bit of broken Urdu or a broken Arabic. So we have to deal with this issue. And that's my last comment. This is such a big topic, but Allah knows best. And please pardon me, afwan minkum, please pardon me for anything that I've said that may have come across as being harsh, or if I made any mistakes in anything I said. I ask you to pray for me. I ask you to pardon me. And it's not my intent in this discussion to offend anyone. I'm just speaking to you from the heart, and as well as from my experience as being an activist in this community for about the last 20 years. So please excuse me.
Well, can you, Brother Dawud, we really appreciate your time. I know you're very busy, and I really thank you. And also we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have you with us here, and this is blessing. And I hope that we at least start the conversation here. We have a lot of work to do in our community and other communities, but at least a starting point. I'd like you to make the final dua, please.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Assalamu alaikum. Just a quick announcements, for our people. The board, inshallah, is going to meet on in June 14th to discuss when and how, whether the next step to open the masjid. So stay tuned, and we'll keep you updated after June 14th, inshallah. And tomorrow there is a lecture at 2 o'clock, actually, to talk about justice in Islam according to the Quran and the Sunnah. So we're going to address some of these issues also tomorrow in this lecture at 2 o'clock. With that, I really appreciate all of you who came. Jazakumullah khair. And inshallah, we'll learn from each other. And this is a starting point for us. And Jazakumullah khair. And